Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to our Tanya class. We began last week the 12th chapter. It can be found in your bilingual edition on page 47. So last week we gave a little oral synopsis of at least the first half of this chapter. And today we'll actually learn it in the Alter Rebbe's words. So we discussed at great length in the past chapters the different categories of tzaddik and rasha, the righteous individual, and then the sinful individual, what categorizes them. By the righteous, not only is their behavior 100% in line with Hashem, which is their garments of thought, speech, and action, but their very soul has become aligned with Hashem's will and Hashem's, Hashem's desire and view and worldview, that there's only God and there's nothing else but God. And everything that tzaddik does is his actions, his words, and his thoughts are all expressions of his inner soul. All his soul wants is to cleave and connect to Hashem through thought, speech, and action. So not only are his garments in line with Hashem, aligned with God, but his very soul is one with Hashem. The rasha, the sinful person, is the very opposite of that. Not only is his soul not aligned with God, meaning that he wants and feels and perceives things that are ungodly, but he actually acts upon them. He actually does things, speaks things, and thinks things that are ungodly. So not only is his very soul not aligned with God, but his actions as well. His garments are also not aligned with Hashem. He does things that have selfish desires, selfish motives, and so on and so forth. And sometimes even sinful. The Beinoni is the person who's now going to be discussed in the next few chapters, or perhaps the rest of the Tanya. That's the person that is somewhere in the middle. He's the intermediary level, which is, from his soul perspective, he's like the sinful person, like the rasha. His soul is not aligned with God. He has cravings and temptations that are very ungodly. But his actions, his behavior is like the tzaddik. He will never allow those that soul desire, those cravings to ever express themselves in either thought, speech, and action. He'll never act on them. He'll never talk something that is ungodly. He'll never think something that is ungodly, and a conscious thought that is. And he'll never do something that is ungodly, although he wants to do things that are ungodly. He has desires for them. His soul is not perfected. His soul is not transformed. His animalistic drives and cravings are very serious, are very self-centered. So that's what he's going to discuss. That's the Beinoni. And he will discuss more nuances in the Beinoni as we make progress in this chapter. So again, we're on page 47, and we'll begin now in the Alter Rebbe's words. The intermediary man, the Beinoni, is he in whom evil never attains enough power. That means there is evil in him, but it never attains enough power to capture the small city. Remember, he gave the example in chapter 9 that the body the body is the small city, and both souls are fighting over it. So by the Beinoni, his evil never attains enough power to capture the small city, so as to clothe itself in the body and make it sin. That never happens by the Beinoni. There's evil there, but it's not strong enough to get him to act upon it. That is to say, the three garments of the animal soul, from which come all the negative desires and so on, namely thought, speech, and act, originating in the klipa, the unholy side, do not prevail within him over the divine soul to the extent of clothing themselves in the body, in the brain, in the mouth, and in the other 248 parts of the body, thereby causing them to sin and defiling them, God forbid. So there's the godly soul, there's the animal soul, as we discussed at great length. The animal soul's evil it's not powerful enough to overcome and overpower the godly soul's the godly soul within him, to actually cause him to act upon his negative desires. That never happens. So he may want to do things that are not really so holy and so godly, but he will never actually do them. That clear? Mm-hmm. Okay. Only the three garments of the divine soul's thought, speech, and action, they alone are implemented in the body. Being the thought, speech, and act engaged, what are the garments of the godly soul? Thought, speech, and act as the engaged in the 613 commandments of the Torah. That's all the godly soul wants to do, and think, and work, and speak. He has never, now this Beinoni has never committed, nor ever will commit, any transgression. Neither can the name wicked, the name sinful or rasha, be applied to him even temporarily or even for a moment throughout his life. I discussed with you already last week that when the Alter Rebbe says these words, that the Beinoni, look at these words again, he has never committed nor ever will commit. How do we know this? I'm a Beinoni now. Does it mean I'll be a Beinoni next year? He doesn't have free choice anymore? What does this mean? Well, how does the Alter Rebbe say such thing? Question number 2. The Beinoni, if I did a sin when I was 15 years old, that's it? I'm never able to be a Beinoni again? Look at these words. He never did, he has never committed, nor ever will commit any transgression. That means that what you're doing is you're excluding anyone that has ever done a sin. So that's it, I can never be a Beinoni again. And somehow the Alter Rebbe has the prophetic knowledge that this person will never do a sin ever again. Is that really the case? Is that possible? How could you know that a Beinoni will never do a sin again? He's not a tzaddik. Tzaddik doesn't do sins because he doesn't have a desire for sin. How could you say about someone that desires sin that will never ever do it? You know his future. What happens if you can have a weak moment next month? How do we know this? So obviously I explained this already last week. That the Alter Rebbe over here does not mean that he never did a sin. I've seen 2 interpretations of what the Alter Rebbe is referring to over here. Number 1, is since he became a Beinoni, he never did a sin. That means if you did a sin in the past, it doesn't mean you can't become a Beinoni. But the more conventional explanation for this is, but the Alter Rebbe is talking about over here, is the Beinoni in his present state. He's reached, at this very moment, his spiritual makeup is of such a nature that he can never see himself doing a sin. It doesn't mean that the free choice is taken away from him. He could, if he slips, he could slip if you choose the wrong way. But in the present state that he's in, his soul is so strong with Hashem. His love for Hashem is so real and so overwhelming that if you analyze him today, you can't see him ever doing a sin, and you can't see him having ever done a sin. That means he's beyond it. In his present state, he's beyond sin, beyond actually sinning. This is not a person that sins. If in his present state, he's reached a level that sin is beyond him in action, or in thought, or in speech. Not in desire. Again, I want to make that clear. He may have desire, but his love is strong enough in this moment. His connection to God is of such a nature that sin is beyond him. In action, in actual behavior. And we're going to discuss what that means, because What does it mean, his love? Where does he get this love from? How do you develop such a love? So we have to understand it. So, but you have a question?
No, I was just thinking that it seems that the adjective Beinoni doesn't really describe a person, it describes a state, the state that the person is in.
Right.
That's I never.
Right, and the same thing with the Rasha and same thing with the Rasha and the same thing with the Tzaddik. It's the state that the person is in, spiritually.
But a Tzaddik never changes his state, is that correct?
He reached that level.
Right, and so for the future we can say that he will not be.
Well, the Gemara talks about Rabbi Yechon and Kohen Gadol. That was a great high priest. He served for 80 years as a high priest, and then he ended up becoming a Tzeduki, a Sadducee, a heretic. So those things, it's very far-fetched. And I explained it, I believe, in a prior class, how it could happen that a tzaddik who never really doesn't have a desire for sin, how do you sin? If he doesn't even have a desire for it, why would he sin? It's like you eating grass. Could you see how does a human being ever eat grass? It's not possible. He has no desire for it. The answer to that is
possible in that high priest's case. What I think is very possible is he still, for himself, never committed a sin, but he became convinced that being a Sadducee was the right thing, and being a Pharisee was not. And so for him, in his mindset, he didn't sin. He did the right thing in his mindset.
Well,
if he thought it was sinful, he probably wouldn't do it.
He knew that it was a sin according to the Torah. But in other words, the bottom line is he became a heretic.
Sure.
He denied the whole oral tradition. But I hear your point. It's a valid point. But I'll explain how it's possible for a tzaddik to ultimately sin. Remember we talked about in chapter 6 and 7, there are three realms. There's holy, there's the totally unholy klippus, and the middle klippa that can go both ways. Remember we talked about that. The tzaddik has no connection to the real unholy klippus. He's done that. He's absolutely no connection that. He abhors it. Anything that is of the unholy klippus, he abhors.
This is the incomplete
as
well as the complete?
Yeah, both. But he does have a real connection to klippas nega, to the neutral klippa. He does have a connection. He eats breakfast. He eats. He wears clothing. He has a connection to klippa. Klippa is anything that is not holy and not unholy. It's in the middle. He always lifts it up to holiness. He's always using the klippas nega in a godly way. So everything he eats is with a godly purpose. His clothing are with a godly purpose. Well, everything is with a godly purpose. Every time he gets onto a bus, it's with a godly purpose. But he's getting onto the bus. The bus is klippas nega. Because he has a connection to klippas nega, and klippas nega has a connection to the three unclean klippas, so if he's not careful with klippas nega enough, he can start slipping into the unholy klippas. So by the tzaddik, he has to be extraordinarily careful with the klippas nega. That should never be. Even the Beinoni has to. But the tzaddik, they both have to. So the tzaddik is more natural for him, that he should never want to do anything that's unholy and ungodly. But because he's in the world of klippas nega, of that neutral realm, and that's very close, the next step is the unholy side, so so he's not totally disconnected from the realm of klippa. He's disconnected from the realm of klippas, from the three unclean klippas, but not from klippas nega. And because he's in that realm every day, because he's living in this world, right? So that could over time, if he can become more. For example, you eat, and for one time, you got caught. You got sidetracked by the good food, by the taste of the food. For a second, for a minute, for whatever. You're now introduced into the into the realm of klippas nega. It's not sinful, but it is klippas nega where it lacks for a little bit of godliness. So that's what the point is, that he's not totally disconnected from the realm of klippa. He's very much connected to the realm of klippa, but klippas nega, and therefore there is a possibility for him to fall into the unholy klippas if you're not careful within the realm of Klipas Negi. You understand what I'm saying? You follow that? If the tzaddik was in heaven, the tzaddik is not living in heaven. Huh? What did you say?
When you're talking about the Benoni,
No, I'm talking about the tzaddik now. How is it possible for tzaddik?
The Benoni, if he's not seen in his life,
he's also only in the world of Klipas Negi, never in the three unclean Klippas.
No, he never think about the unholy Klippa?
He's never involved in it. He wants it, but he never goes to, never acts on it. The tzaddik doesn't even want it. The tzaddik is disgusted by it.
Benoni want it?
But he never acts on it. Yeah. The tzaddik doesn't even want it. But he does want to eat. The tzaddik wants to eat. He feels hungry.
But for holy
purposes. But he's getting close. But he's in the world of the klippa, and therefore he's not totally disconnected from klippa reality. And therefore, it could happen that if in an extreme case that he slips a little bit, he could end up slipping. It's very uncommon. But let's move on back to the Beini, the subject of the Beini. So when the Alter Rebbe says here that the Beini never did a sin and never will do a sin, he's talking about in the present state of the Beini. This person right now, if you analyze him in his level of love for Hashem, in his current state in the spiritual attainment, this is not a person that will sin. This is not a person that sins. He's strong enough to overcome the temptation. Let's see how. However, the essence of and being of the divine soul, which are its 10 faculties, right? The soul itself is by him not transformed. Do not constantly hold undisputed sovereignty and sway over the small city. The soul of the divine soul, meaning the 10 faculties of the divine soul, are not the only force within this person's body, except at appropriate times. There are before we go to accept, who else has an opinion and has dominion over the body? The animal soul. The animal soul of the Beini has a very strong presence in the Beini's existence. His body feels, his heart feels desires for and temptations for unholy things. That means like this: there are two souls, and this is the body. Let's do this like this. You have the body, you have two souls. These two souls have 3 garments. Okay? What are the garments? Thought, speech, and action. Okay. Let's take these 2 souls for a minute. These 2 souls are fighting over this body. This is the godly soul. It wants that only it should have presence in this body. This animal soul wants exactly the same. Only it should have presence in the body. That means the body should only want what it wants and only desire what it wants and so on. Each one is targeting at wants total control over the body. By the tzaddik, this soul has no opinion in this body anymore. Only this soul has opinion in this body, let alone the 3 garments. That's for sure the only thing that has that will manifest itself in this body. But the soul itself is the only, he has taken control entirely of this body. By the Beini, he's saying these 2 souls are fully in force within this body. This wants godliness and this wants selfishness. And they're both fully present in the soul. The difference is that only this soul's garments are manifest in this body. That means that although this soul has strong presence in this body, it wants negative things, it wants selfish things, it has desires and cravings to selfish things, it doesn't have the power enough to get it to actually act and bring in the 3 garments of this soul. It doesn't have the power to actually get the body to clothe itself, to put on these garments. That will never happen. It has full presence in the body, the soul itself, but it doesn't have the power to get this body to go and put on these garments, to either think, speak, or do something that the animal soul wants. Ivantem, you understand? That's what the Alter Rebbe begins. The intermediate, look at the beginning of the chapter, first 2 lines. The intermediate man is in whom evil never attains enough power to capture the small city, as to clothe itself in the body and make it sin. That never happens. But go back down over here by the triangle. However, the essence and being of the divine soul, which are its 10 faculties, do not constantly hold undisputed sovereignty and sway over the small city. Not only this soul has control of this body, this soul also has equal amount of power in this body. They both want, the body feels tremendous desire, sometimes for holy and godly things, but very many times for unholy and ungodly things. So in that sense, both souls are in full dominion of this body. You understand?
They both exist.
They both very much exist by the Beinoni. Except when there is a time when even in the Beinoni's body, this animal soul has lost control. It's not present in this body. It's present there, but not its desires. He doesn't feel the desire. There are times when the Beinoni does not feel any urge or craving or temptation for anything ungodly. When are those times? And that's what he's going to say now. Except at appropriate times, such as during the recital of the Shema or the Amidah, when he davens. When the Beinoni davens, which is a time when the supernal intellect is in a sublime state, and likewise below, this is a propitious time. Let's analyze it. What does that mean? He's saying that when the Beinoni davens, something special happens in him. When the Beinoni davens, his godly soul takes full control over his body, his heart, his mind. The animal soul's desires are shut down. He doesn't even feel them. On a regular Tuesday morning or Tuesday, and any day, even this outside of davening, he feels both tugging at him. When he davens, this is put to sleep. Only the godly soul is present in his body in the sense of a conscious desire. His conscious desires and wills and cravings are only for godliness. At those moments, his animal soul is shut down. Why? He says because davening is a time when the supernal intellect is in a sublime state. What is supernal intellect? Chochmah Bina and Das of the higher worlds. Hashem's Chochmah Bina and Das. On a state of greatness. And therefore, he says, and likewise below, here within the Beinoni, down here, the Chochmah Bina Das are in an elevated state. What is he talking about over here? Let me explain. What is Chochmah Bina Das? I'm sorry, Chabad is Chochmah Bina Das, the intellectual faculties of our soul, our intellect. There's something called Meichem de Gadlus, elevated or that our intellect is in a sublime state, and there's something called Meichem de Katnus, Katan, when our intellect is in a not sublime state, in a very small, lowered state, okay. Or smallness. There's large and there's small. Our life, we go back and forth between Meichem de Gadlus and Meichem de Katnus. What do I mean by that? To put it in very simple terms, Meichem de Katnus is we use our mind to get caught up with the here and now, with our pettiness, our small things. We get carried away with things that are of lesser importance, let's say, or if you want to really break it down, with matters of the body, with matters of the animal soul, our parnas, our money, our other things of that nature. Our life here on earth, Meichem de Gadlus is when you have a moment where your mind is larger. What does it mean, larger? When it realizes it's thinking about and caught up with matters of greatness. What is that? Godliness. The real important things in life. Not the here and now, this minute, what's good for me right now, but what's good for me ultimately. says during davening, which is those hours in the morning that are the time for davening, is a time of supernal, sublime. The supernal wisdom is in a sublime state, and therefore it affects our ability down here also for our minds to be in a sublime state. Those are the hours when we daven. Okay, those are the morning hours. Those times, a person has the ability, a greater, it's a more propitious time. It's a more opportune time to focus in and delve and zero in on the things that are beyond, things that are really important. Our soul, God, the real truth, the truths of life. Meichen de Gadlus. I'm explaining it on a very basic level. During davening is the time when this is present. The Beinani uses that time, and I mentioned this last week also, davening for the Beinani is the crucial moments, the hours of his day. Without davening, he can't be a Beinani. If he doesn't use that time properly, there's no way he can be a Beinani. He utilizes that time in its perfect state. What happens? So let's see what he does. What does he do during this propitious time? This is a propitious time, on top of the right column, for every man, for every one of us. When he binds his Chabad, intellectual faculty, his Chochmah Bin Adas, his intellect, to God, to meditate deeply on the greatness of the blessed Ein Sof, and this is a very important point. He delves in, meditates, and contemplates, and he fixes his mind in the subject of the greatness of God. To arouse, which then causes it to arouse the burning love in the right part of his heart, which is where the godly soul's love is. Remember, we learned in chapter 9. To cleave to him, by virtue, how do you cleave to God at the end of the day? By virtue, by fulfillment of the Torah and its commandments out of love. Now, by davening, I mentioned to you last week that in the divine service of a chassid, of a Jew that lives by the Alter Rebbe's program in Tanya, by a Jew of Tanya, davening is an extremely, extremely important time in his life. There were chassidim, and I knew them, some of them, but mainly, even more in the previous generations, that davened all day, almost all day. There were such chassidim that davened all day. There were chassidim that didn't daven all day every day, but 3 hours a day. Shachas took them 3 hours for sure. What were they doing? It doesn't take them 3 hours to say the words. You say it in a half hour, you're finished. The slowest reader, 45 minutes. It doesn't take 3 hours, 4 hours to daven. On the Shabbos, by the way, many chassidim. You'd go into a chassidic shtibel, people are davening 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They're still davening. They start at 9. Or they start at 7 preparing for davening. Davening was a whole day affair. They davened the whole day till the end, till sundown. They didn't finish davening. What were they doing? What are they doing for 6 hours davening? What did they daven for 6 hours? So the Beini, this person that the davening of this, the real experience of davening, they're not saying words for 6 hours. There's not enough words in the Siddur to say, and the Shachris to say for 6 hours. They go through the Siddur, and if you ever read the morning davening, what does it talk about? In the Psukkah, the Zimra, and the verses of praise talks about how God created the world, and how He's kind, and He provides, and He's all these things. And the blessings of the Shabbat goes on to talk even more sublime things, the angels and so on and so forth. But it talks about, at the end of the day, in one word, it talks about Godless Ein Sof, the greatness of the infinite God. The Beini spends time contemplating that at great length. Now, where does he get the information? Of course, he learns discourses in Kabbalah and Chassidus. He knows this information. But it's not enough to know it. You have to actually think about it. And he fixes his mind, as we learned in chapter 3, Bina Das, which means to fix your mind on the subject. There's nothing else. That's Jewish meditation, by the way. Jewish meditation means to fix your mind on the subject and think only about it. In this case, godliness, the greatness of God. So he goes through the Siddur, and he can stop on one page for an hour. And he can sing a melody. As he's thinking, he sings a melody that helps him get into that atmosphere, into that mindset. And if you watch this, it's a fascinating thing. My father told me that he had a mentor in Paris when he learned in yeshiva in Paris. He used to go watch him daven. That was he wanted to see it. He was oblivious that there were people watching him. He was totally he wasn't even aware that people are watching him daven. But it was something to see. A chassid that was a Jew that was totally involved in the present, in the moment. He was in a different world. He was in the world of godliness. And the chassid and the Jew, while he does this, he's connecting his mind and heart to this truth in a powerful, powerful way. And is present in him for the rest of the day. It affects him the rest of the day. So he doesn't feel that burning love in his heart like he does during davening. During davening, the chassid's heart is on fire for Hashem. When he goes to his shop and he's working, whether he's a blacksmith or he's a sheikhet or whatever he does for a living, which he has to do to make a parnasa. So he's not having that burning love in his heart at that moment. He's fixing shoes or whatever. He's a shoemaker. Whatever it is that he's doing, selling eggs in a supermarket. Or doing some other business, whatever it is that he does. But then he doesn't feel that burning love in his heart, and his mind is not either fixed in it either. But what happens during davening is the truth and the reality of God becomes so real in his life that even when he's later on walking the street and he's involved in his daily affairs, it's strong enough to make sure that even when this soul wakes up again and attacks the city, tries to get into the city, meaning in the body, and get into and he feels the cravings again, that experience during davening carries over the day to make sure that although this becomes very present in his life, he'll never have the power to get him to put on the garments of that soul. You follow what I'm saying? That power has. So during davening, this soul by the Beni is asleep. When he's on love, in this fascinating love for Hashem, and his mind is fixed into it, he doesn't feel cravings for other things. It's only one thing at that moment. It's God, and anything that God wants, that's all he wants. He wants to cleave to God. His love for Hashem is like burning cold, like burning. It's burning in his heart. So at that moment, this is asleep. This other soul is asleep. But then the Beinoni finishes his davening, takes off his talis and tefillin, and this guy wakes up. This soul wakes up with a vengeance. It's back at it, making the Beinoni crazy with cravings and desires and schlepping him and confusing him and so on. But although it becomes present again, it wakes up fully. It's not strong enough to get him, to get the body to put on the garments of the animal soul, thought, speech, or action. That experience during davening holds him strong throughout the day, at least for that person, in that sense. So the burning fire in the love in his heart is not present anymore after davening. But there's something left there. The resolve, I guess you can call it, that I'm never doing anything. My life is about God. And therefore, although I have these desires once again, I'll never let them get the better part of me. Let's see it in Alter Rebbe's words. Let's read from the triangle again on the left column. However, the essence and being of the divine soul, which are its 10 faculties, do not constantly hold undisputed sovereignty and sway over the small city. It has its desires. It's very opinionated. It has full presence in the godly soul, in the body, just like the godly soul is. Both souls are there. Except at the appropriate times, the godly soul takes full dominion over the body. When is that? Such as during the recital of the Shema and the Amidah. which is a time when the supernal intellect is in a sublime state, as I explained before. It's a time that a Jew can see things from a higher perspective. His mind isn't to bigger things, because his mind becomes bigger. What causes us to be caught up with the small things of life? Our mind is minute, becomes small. It's meichin de katnus. We become small-minded. We become large-minded during davening. It's a time when we're able to see things from a bird's eye view. What's really important in life? Meichin de gadlus. Our mind becomes bigger, and during davening, that's that time. And likewise below, here by us, it also affects us, that our minds become bigger. What does bigger mean? To be connected to higher things. This is a propitious time for every man when he binds his Chabad, intellectual faculties, Chochmah, Bina, and Das, to God, to meditate deeply on the greatness of the Blessed Ein Sof, and to arouse the burning love in the right part of his heart, to cleave to Him by virtue of the fulfillment. How do you cleave to Hashem? To bring it to action, to do the mitzvahs, the fulfillment of the Torah and its commandments out of love. Now, why during davening? What's the beauty of davening? Because he said that's the topic of davening. When you read the davening, what does it say there? Let's see. That's what he says now. This is the essential aspect of the Shema. What does the Shema talk about? The recital of which is enjoined by the Torah. The Torah tells us you have to say the Shema every day, right? It's a biblical mitzvah. And of the blessings which precede and follow it, which are the rabbinic enactment. What does the Torah, you ever opened up the Siddur and read what it discusses in the prayers before the Shema and during the Shema? It talks about love of Hashem. And the blessings beforehand, what I mentioned last week, usually before you do a mitzvah, there's a mitzvah to make a blessing, right? Before every mitzvah, before you blow the shofar, you make a bracha. Before you light candles, you make a bracha. What's the bracha? A short line, one line. Whatever the mitzvah is. There's no mitzvah, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam, there's no such mitzvah, bracha. Why didn't the rabbis institute such a blessing like by every mitzvah? The answer is they did, but it's a much longer blessing. What's the blessing of the Shema that the rabbis instituted? From after Yishtabach till the Shema, the two long blessings. Those are two long blessings. Why didn't they make a short blessing? Why did they make such a long blessing for the Shema? Or two long blessings? Very simple. And there's blessings after the Shema too. It's like a whole... Why? Because what do we do? What's the Shema? What's the mitzvah of Shema?
That's a great question. What's
the mitzvah of blowing shofar? To blow shofar. So you make a quick blessing and you blow. It takes practice of how to blow. That's it. What's the mitzvah of Shema? To love Hashem. That's what the mitzvah is. V'ahavtas Hashem aleikecha, to love Hashem. The mitzvah is to arouse a love in your heart. You can just arouse a love in your heart like that? No. So the bracha has to be commensurate with the bracha for the mitzvah has to be commensurate with the mitzvah itself. So the bracha is meant to get you into the atmosphere of loving Hashem. How do you do that? So it lays out for you those topics that when you contemplate them and you say them and you think about them, that will get you to love Hashem. Those are the blessings of the Shema. You understand? So the Beinani utilizes that hour, that time of davening to think about these things which arouse a love in his heart. The Beinani davening is the crucial time of his day. Without it, you can't be a Beinani. So let's see what he says.
I have just one question.
Yep.
From this, I'd like to understand, maybe I'm not understanding it. Chachma, Bina, and Das, as described here, it characterizes it as it's bound to the greatness of the blessed Ein Sof. The source of this is the Ein Sof.
The source of what?
Chachma, let's say, in our brain.
Where are you reading? Show me the
Because
word.
it's the end of that paragraph that we were just on.
All right, let's. I'll get there in a minute. Let me get there.
All right.
Let's not run ahead of ourselves.
All right.
And that's what he says of here. We're about 7-8 lines from the top. This is the essential aspect of the Shema, which is the recital which is enjoined by the Torah. That's the mitzvah of the Torah. What's the essential aspect of Shema? Love love of Hashem, and of the blessings which precede and follow it, which are rabbinical enactment, which are very long blessings. There's not a one-line blessing, because the rabbis are trying to get us, to get the Jew into the atmosphere of loving Hashem. You can't just turn on a button and blow. You can blow. You take the shofar and you blow. You can't just love. Love takes understanding, and that's why these blessings are so long. But the blessings talk about the greatness of Hashem, and the Beinoni gets into that. The Jew gets into that. The Jew that takes davening serious gets very much into that, and therefore it spends time on it. Davening to him is an experience. It's the experience of the day. The latter being the preparation of for the fulfillment of the recital of the Shema, as is explained elsewhere. At such time, he says, when this Jew is davening, the evil that is in the left part is subjugated to and nullified in the goodness that is diffused in the right part. What happens in the right part? There's a much stronger good of the godliness that is present in the right part because of this unbelievable love that it feels. So the evil of the negative, the animalistic drives become nullified to it. Let's read this again. At such time, the evil that is in the left part is subjected to, subjected to and nullified in the goodness that is diffused in the right part from the wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, Chabad, which are those three faculties of Chabad, in the brain, which are bound to the greatness of the blessed Ein Sof. At this time during davening, the Chabad, the Chochmah, Bina, Das, and this Beinoni are totally bound to fixated in the meditation on the greatness of God. That produces a tremendous love in the heart. When the love in the heart on the right side, where the godly soul is present, is so strong, the evil and the cravings and the temptations of the animal soul become subjected to and nullified. But that's only during davening.
Maybe I misunderstood. This is a flow upward, not downward. Is that correct?
What do you mean the flow? Yeah. The Beinoni is arising upwards towards God.
It's not that the Ein Sof.
God is not arousing him. He's working on this.
I got it.
This is his doing. He has the elements that he needs for it. He has a godly soul. He has a neshama that gives him the ability to do this. But don't we all? We all have that. So he utilizes the Beinoni is working very hard during davening. This is his reaching upward to cleave to God. He arouses within himself a tremendous love of Hashem, and once he has this great love of Hashem during davening, which he feels it's palpable in his heart, he wants to cleave to God very, very much. When you love something, you want it very much. How do you get God? Torah mitzvahs. So the rest of the day he's doing Torah mitzvahs, or serving God through his business, through his actions, through his food, through everything. He's fixed. He wants only one thing.
So you build this meditation every day?
Every day, yeah.
You need to build or you feel it from the first time that you start.
Obviously, it gets easier for him. You train yourself. It's a little easier. But on Shabbos, he spends a whole day in davening. Not every Beinoni. Different Beinonis do different things. I mean, some Beinonis need to daven for a whole day. Some don't. Some works for them. But they're davening. But their davening is an experience.
When you said the Beinoni had never seen in his life, meaning from the day that he was born?
No, that's what I'm saying. I didn't say that. I made that clear before.
Yeah.
That Alter Rebbe doesn't mean from the day he's born. It's in his present state he's beyond sin. That's what he means.
That's Beinoni and tzaddik from the day that he was born?
No, from the day he became a tzaddik. Which is usually he's born already to become a tzaddik. But I don't know if every tzaddik was a tzaddik since he was born.
Can you explain again what it means? In his life he never was...
It means like this, that right now, I'll give you an example. Let's take a person, I'll give you a crazy, extreme example. Let's say you have a murderer. Some of them murder. Let's say something simple. Someone is a bank robber. He's a thief. Until he's 25, he's been robbing banks all day long. He's in and out of jail. Then he wakes up one day and says, this is not a life. This is bad behavior. It's not right. I have to make amends of myself. And he works on himself. He goes to his mentors, and he goes to his parents, he goes to teachers, and he works himself over to the point where he because he gets beyond, he can't, he becomes a mensch. Becomes a real mensch, and he starts helping people. Instead of stealing, he gives all his money away to charity, and he goes to the other extreme. And then he can balance himself out, right? That's what it says. When you're on this side of the spectrum, in the negative behavior, you have to go to the other extreme, and then you can go to the middle. So he goes to the other extreme. He really becomes a mensch. He's giving, and he helps people in the hospital, and he goes and visits the sick, and he brings the elderly meals, and he's just become an unbelievable good person. And wherever he has an opportunity to do something good, he does it. You analyze him 20 years later, he's 45, 50 years old now. You say, look at this person. He's reached a point where robbing a bank is totally beyond him. It's impossible for that to happen again. His soul has worked himself to the point where that's out of his realm. That's what the Alter Rebbe is talking about. At that point, you look at him and says, this is a person that never robbed a bank. This is a person that never will rob a bank. That's what he means. Not that it couldn't happen 30 years ago before he reached this, that he did. In this present state, he's beyond it. That's what he means. He's gotten to a point where this is beyond him. That's the Beinin. Sin is beyond him. Actual sin. Not cravings for sin. Cravings for sin are not beyond him, but actual sin.
So every person, Jewish person, in every point of his life can be a Benoni.
He can be, every one of us could become a Benoni. Yeah,
100%.
100%. But it takes a lot of work. It's not, that's the davening is the crucial aspect of the Beinoni's life, the Beinoni's day. But look what happens. Look what the Alter Rebbe is going to say now. However, after davening, after prayer, when the state of sublimity of the intellect of the Blessed Ein Sof departs, it's no longer that situation, the evil in the left part reawakens, and he begins to feel a desire for the lusts of the world and its delights. He's back at it, back to square one. But it's not square one. That's the key. Yet, and this is very important, yet because the evil has not the sole authority and dominion over the city, what happens? We said the animal soul wakes up again and parks himself in the body, right? I'm here. I want this, I want that. But he's not the only one. The godly soul is also very present, right? He said, yet because the evil has not the sole authority and dominion over the city, the body, it is unable to carry out this desire from the potential into the actual. By clothing itself, by getting the body to clothe itself in his three garments, in the bodily limbs, in deed, speech, and persistent thought. Now I'll explain that in a minute. Persistent thought to the extent of concentrating his attention on the enjoyment of the mundane pleasures as to how to satisfy the lust of his heart. That will never happen. He will never allow his thoughts to dwell on them, certainly never allow his mouth to speak about them, and certainly not let his hands and the rest of his body act upon them. How? Why? How does he have that power? What holds him back all day long from that? Right? He says, because, look at these next words, are very important. Because the brain rules over the heart, skip the parentheses, by virtue of its innately created nature. Alter Rebbe says over here something very crucial. And I explained this last week, if you remember. It's called Me'ach Shalit al Halev. It's our nature. God created us this way, that this mind is stronger than the heart. Period. The mind is stronger than the heart. What happens by the Beinoni? So again, the Beinoni davened. He had an experience during davening that shut down his animal soul, its desires. Doesn't feel craving. During davening, he feels no pull or desire or attraction to anything that's ungodly. None at all. Why? Because during davening, his mind became very attached to God in a very, very powerful way. Very powerful way. To the point where it created this tremendous love for Hashem in his heart. But then after davening, when that sublime state of the mind is departed, so this wakes up again. The animal soul wakes up fully. But what happens is the mind has become that davening experience, the mind became convinced of godliness. The mind is convinced that God is the only truth. But when you're fixing shoes, if you're a shoemaker, the Bainey's business is to sell wood, whatever it is, sell cars, whatever it may be. He's not thinking about God at that time. And nor should he. If you want to make a sale, you got to think about your customer and about the, between customers, he should probably say a little Tillim, say a little Mishnayos. They do good things during, that's what it says, these Jews, while they're not doing anything, they're busy. They're not on their phones looking at, YouTube. The mind, so now you have these two souls fighting over the body. The soul of the godly soul is in the brain. The soul, the animal soul is in the heart, right? My friends, the Alter Rebbe says over here, you should know, you're born, the nature of the human being is that the mind is stronger than the heart. If you have a fight between the mind and the heart, you have a struggle, a battle between the mind and the heart, the mind is going to win. That's always going to be the case. That's the way it is. It's like a lion and a gazelle, like I gave last week. A lion fights a sheep. A lion fights a sheep. The lion is going to win.
Where is the bad thought? In the mind or in the heart?
Where's the bad thought? The thoughts are in the mind.
In the mind.
But it comes from the heart. It comes from the animal soul. The meaning, the mind is where the godly soul is, and the heart is where the... Why do you want something bad? Because your heart wants it. It's a desire of the heart. So it sends a message to the brain, hey, maybe we should go get that, what my heart desires. It starts from the heart, sure. You're conscious of it in your brain, obviously. All conscious, any awareness is in the brain. But it's coming from the heart. The godly soul starts in the brain. We learned that already, if you remember. The brain is stronger than the heart. The brain is a lion, the heart is a sheep. The lion will always win over a sheep. That is, if the lion is not sleeping, gets into the fight. If the lion is not going to fight, and it's only going to let the sheep fight, the sheep will win, of course. What happens by all of us who end up sinning? There's a battle between the mind and the heart won, right? The Alter Rebbe says the mind always wins, but we know from our lives that the heart wins more than we want it to win. What is the Alter Rebbe saying over here? We know that we have battles all day long between good and between godly and selfish stuff, and the selfish side overpowers much more than we wanted to. And we regret it later, but we know that we lost the war. So what are you telling me that when the mind and the heart are going to engage in battle, the mind will always win, the godly soul will always win? It's not true. Our experience tells us different. You know why it's not true? Why we lose?
Why what?
Why we lose the battle when we lose? Why we sin and lose? Why we lose battles? Because we never got into it. It was not a real battle. The mind was never really engaged in the battle. What happens when you have craving? Think about it. You have this tremendous craving for something. Yeah? You really want it. Your mind goes and says, you really think you should do this? Probably not. What does your heart do at that point? You don't even give the battle a chance. You don't even give the brain, the godly side of you, a fair chance to voice his opinion. You shut it down. The heart wants it so much that you know that your mind could give an... You don't let your mind get involved. It doesn't get in the ring. How do you... What's a true battle? You want something. Ungodly, unholy, not good. Your mind has to tell your heart, okay, let's think about this for an hour. Calm down. In 24 hours from now, we'll come back to this. Let's think this over 24 hours. Your heart doesn't want to wait 24 hours. It says, no, I want to have it now. The mind says, no, we're going to think about this. If your mind engages in battle with your heart, the mind will always win. The problem is we never say, let's wait 15 minutes. Let's wait an hour, let's wait an hour. The mind, it's somewhere in your mind it tells you know it's wrong, but you don't let it really give an opinion. And that's why the heart wins. The heart wins because the lion is asleep. But if the lion got involved, if the mind got engaged, would engage in the battle against the heart, it would always win. It will always win. It has to. That's the nature. A lion who gets involved is going to win over a sheep. It's impossible that it shouldn't. Unless it has a broken leg or something's wrong. The problem with us is we lose because we're not battling. The Baini has the fortitude to battle. His mind is still, the godly experience he had during davening is still very present in his mind, even later. Enough to get him to battle, to get into the battle. And when they battle, he always wins. Think about it. Next time you have a battle between your animal and godly souls, analyze what happens. You'll see that that's what happens. If you're going to engage in the battle and your mind is going to rise up and say, I want to make sure that my opinion is heard here. And you have an objective, you give the objective opinion as much as possible. And the heart wants it. If the heart is on fire, the mind has to cool it off, right? That's to cool off the fire. That's what it is. The mind is cool, calm, and collected. The heart is racing like is on fire. Is it a fair battle? It's a fair battle because the mind is stronger than the heart. The reason the mind gives in, it loses because it gives in before it even started fighting. That's what happens. It's too tired to fight. It gives in, and so on and so forth. But when you're not too tired to fight, and the Baini's mind is never too tired to fight, the Baini's mind is strong enough to fight. That davening gives him that strength, that throughout the day he should have strength to fight. By davening he doesn't have to fight, because it's asleep. But it wakes up after davening. The Me'ach Shalit ala Lev, the mind has enough power to overcome that part by nature, and it has the power to fight. And when it fights, it always wins. You follow? You understand? Let's stop here, and we'll continue next week to discuss this topic a little more.